Hello, everyone. Welcome for a late night edition of True Crime Vampires in History. Today, we're going to be going to Sacramento, California to cover the case of Richard Chase, who was known as the Vampire of Sacramento. He also was sometimes called the Vampire Unaliver and the Dracula Unaliver. Richard was born May 23rd, 1950 in Santa Clara County, California. Like many others in the series, Richard was and he consumed the life fluid of his victims. A total of 6 victims were taken by Richard Chase. However, Richard had a history of some strange activity. As a child, he had a preoccupation with setting fires. He had issues with bedwetting, and he also had a fascination with torturing animals. As he got older, he began experimenting with hugs and got into some different types of intoxicants. He was in and out of several mental institutions for several years during that time period, and he became somewhat of a hypochondriac, claiming that his life fluid was turning to powder. By the time he was 21 years old, he was living on his own, and he had some roommates that got tired of his in and out behavior with mental institutions and his addictions with hugs. When his roommates left, he ended up moving back in with his father, and at this time he didn't have much of a social life and didn't have any girlfriends, but he began unaliving animals and consuming their life fluids. In 1976, he was hospitalized for life fluid poisoning after injecting the life fluid of a rabbit into himself. Many of the nurses and doctors in the hospital where he was admitted were frightened of him and began calling him Dracula. He was frequently found with life fluid smeared all over his face. When asked about this, he always gave the excuse that he cut himself shaving, but it was later discovered that he was actually biting the heads off of birds and consuming their life fluids. Around 1977, Chase was found in a field near Lake Tahoe, Nevada. He was completely nude and covered in life fluid. It so happened that the life fluid happened to belong to a cow. Though the incident was reported, the authorities did nothing about it. A few short months later, Chase got a hold of a pew-pew and fired and unalived his first victim, whose name was Ambrose Griffin. The police said that this was a drive-by situation. However, they did not have Richard Chase as a suspect in the beginning. They did not know who was responsible for this incident. His next victim was 22-year-old Terry Wallen, the wife of David Wallen. She was a pregnant woman, and when her husband David returned home from work, he found her disemboweled and drained of all of her life fluid. It also appeared that Chase had collected her life fluid into a yogurt container in order to drink it. Again, in this case, authorities had no leads connecting this situation to Chase. However, an investigation began, and it was discovered that there were other burglaries in the area and that there had been the unaliving of a dog when the disemboweled remains of the dog were found. The FBI began to develop a profile on their unaliver in this situation, and they put out announcements asking for leads and tips on the situation. However, it did not take long for the next unaliving to occur, and this one was a large and horrible, tragic scene. When a neighbor entered the home of one, she found the body of 36-year-old Evelyn Marath perished. However, Evelyn was not the only one. Her friend Daniel Meredith was found unalived, as was her 6-year-old son Jason, and her nephew, 22-month-old Michael Ferreira, was completely missing from the home. The playpen where Michael would normally be found was covered in life fluid, and there was a pew-pew hole in one of the pillows inside of the playpen. The child, however, was nowhere to be found, and the police figured that he had probably unalived Michael and taken the body with him. Richard was finally arrested when a young woman who had known him from high school reported to the police that he had approached her car with sunken eyes and seeming quite strange, and that something seemed awry. So when the police got a hold of him and seen the things that he had in his possession, they apprehended him immediately. Now, having them, they discovered that he lived in a 10-mile radius of all of the unaliving. After he was forcibly detained, the police went to his apartment and found several items that connected him to the unaliving. First was the pew that was found. A 12-inch butcher knife was also found, and 3 blenders containing life fluid, in addition to rubber boots, animal collars, and several dishes in his refrigerator containing body parts. A calendar was even found in his apartment with the word "today" on the day of Meredith and Wallen's unalivings, and the mummified corpse of an infant was also discovered in his apartment and was confirmed to be the body of her nephew. His trial began in 1979, and Richard pleaded not guilty by reason of insanity. However, after examination, he was found to be mentally competent, and he was charged with all 6 counts of unaliving. During an interview, he admitted that he would stalk the streets of Sacramento, checking to see if doors were unlocked. He said that if they were locked, that meant you were not welcome. After his conviction, Richard began receiving regular medication. After stockpiling his medication on December 26, 1980, Richard Chase unalived his own self and dispatched his own life in his prison cell in San Quentin. And that is the story of the Sacramento vampire, Richard Chase. We only have one more episode in the True Crime Vampires in History series. If there are any stories that you guys would like me to cover, please feel free to let me know. You can DM, you can put them in the comments. I have a new series that I'm going to be working on. I think I'll be doing that as soon as we get done with this. But the final True Crime Vampire in History we will be covering is none other than the Countess of Elizabeth Bathory. And I'll be coming at you with that shortly. Until next time, I hope that you guys stay safe out there and have a great week.